There's a fundamental contradiction at the very core of personal productivity. You see, the systems that are meticulously designed to maximize our output are themselves subject to a predictable and, frankly, catastrophic rate of failure. And this isn't just an opinion, it's a documented systemic flaw. 27%. That's the number. After a 12-month analysis of almost 20,000 people inside a highly structured behavioral framework, that's the long-term adherence rate. This number isn't just a data point, it's a hard boundary. What it really means is the vast majority of users are guaranteed to fail. So what that quote is really telling you is that the systems you're sold, the ones you're told to use, they're simply not designed for the way your brain is actually wired to operate. Their failure isn't a bug you can patch. No, it's the core feature of a completely mismatched architecture. And you've almost certainly experienced this yourself, right? That journal you bought that's now sitting empty, the productivity app you used for a week and now ignore. Your inability to stick with these rigid frameworks isn't a personal failing. It's actually a successful execution of your own biological survival algorithm. To understand why, we have to look at the brain's non-negotiable energy budget. You see, the root cause of this massive system malfunction, it's not about a lack of willpower or some kind of psychological weakness. It's a hard-coded limitation in our neurobiology. It's a strict energy budget that you'll find most productivity systems completely ignore. Your brain, at its core, is an energy miser. It's been evolutionarily programmed to default to the path of least resistance, which is low-energy, reactive control. It corrects things late, only after it's been triggered by the environment. But these rigid productivity systems, they force it into a constant state of proactive control, an anticipatory, high-energy state that is, from a metabolic standpoint, completely unsustainable. And here's the hard number that governs it all. 10 bits per second. That is the absolute non-negotiable speed limit for your conscious thought. Now, while your senses are processing something like 1 billion bits of data every second, your prefrontal cortex, the part that's supposed to manage these rigid schedules, is throttled to just 10. That's barely the speed of reading a short sentence. These systems are demanding a bandwidth that your biology simply cannot and will not provide. Okay, so this brings us to the central paradox. If these systems are so biologically doomed to fail, why do we all know high performers who swear by them? Their success seems to invalidate this whole biological argument, but it doesn't. Their success is actually driven by an unseen and usually unacknowledged confounding variable. And this variable is what gives rise to something I call the executive function fallacy. It's this flawed assumption that the system is what causes the high performance, when in reality, it's just a classic case of confusing correlation with causation. See, here's the twist. High performers don't become productive because they use the system. It's the other way around. Their high pre-existing executive function, their brain's built-in ability to manage attention and regulate impulses, allows them to tolerate the system's immense administrative burden while still generating high output. It's a prerequisite, not a result. So the system doesn't create productivity. It just acts as a filter that reveals a pre-existing neurological advantage. And for the majority of the population, these systems aren't a tool at all. They're attacks. They add an extra cognitive load that pushes their neural architecture directly towards a predictable, catastrophic failure. We can actually see this tax in action at a specific failure point. The system literally exhausts the very neurochemicals needed to run it, which causes a collapse in your working memory. Think of that as your brain's RAM. And look at this. The depletion of just a single neurotransmitter, GABA, accounts for nearly a third of this performance collapse when you're under a high cognitive load. And these are the non-negotiable limits. If you exceed them, you guarantee a systemic breakdown. The data is incredibly clear that hyper-engagement, like trying to track more than 25 separate inputs a month, is one of the most reliable predictors of just giving up on the system entirely. The architecture is just fatally misaligned with our neurobiology. So, if we accept that the biological hardware is fixed, the only variable left in the equation is the cognitive operating system, and this requires a really radical shift in our whole architecture. This thinking introduces a completely different paradigm, a cold, almost mechanistic protocol that is designed to bypass the biological flaws of emotion-driven action altogether. Let's be honest, motivation is just a transient neurochemical state. It's a catastrophically unreliable foundation to build any kind of long-term execution on. A truly functional system cannot depend on it. Instead, action has to be dictated by a predefined logical system, not by your fluctuating emotional states. So the core operating principle here is to sever the link between feeling and doing. You literally learn to obey your own pre-planned rational directives, no matter what your current emotional state is. The feeling is acknowledged, and then it's ignored. The system's command is executed. Period. Now, to maintain this state of logical supremacy, you need some very specific philosophical tools. They're rooted in this idea of akarma, or action without attachment. But, and this is crucial, these tools come with a significant psychological cost. This might sound spiritual, but you should think of it as a purely cognitive tool. By detaching yourself from the outcome, you eliminate your ego's interference. This purifies your focus, so it's entirely on the quality of the execution itself. It converts that frantic, anxious action into a state of flow, and it completely neutralizes the anxiety of potential failure. So here are the practical rules for managing failure inside this detached framework. You treat setbacks not as moral failings, but as simple engineering problems that need to be solved with cold, clinical precision. And this entire analysis, it leads us to an inescapable conclusion. It's a logic loop that if high performance is your ultimate goal, there really is no escape from. The argument is a closed loop. The biological failure of conventional systems forces us to find a new architecture. And that new architecture, in order to achieve the consistency that's required, has to be system-driven. And it must neutralize the primary source of all inconsistency, human emotion. Now, I need to be absolutely clear. This protocol is not a recommendation for most people. It is a high-risk, specialized system designed for very specific outcomes, because no easy fix exists for the fundamental biological limitations that we've outlined. And the costs of this protocol are severe. They have to be acknowledged. Adopting this kind of framework carries a very high probability of burnout, social isolation, and a dangerous desensitization to crucial emotional signals. Not to mention, the initial setup cost, cognitively, is immense. So, based on this entire analysis, here is a falsifiable market prediction. By 2030, the productivity industry is going to split. The mass market, about 90%, will sell commoditized wellness. But a niche, high-cost sector will emerge, treating human performance as a pure engineering problem. And yet, through all of that, the population-wide adherence rate to any high-constraint system will remain stubbornly below 30%.